auditing the Department of Environmental Protection on how they're effectively protecting our water, making sure that our water is protected with all of the Marcellus Shale drilling. We are close to wrapping up an audit of the Department of Community and Economic Development to see how their job creation programs are working for the people of Pennsylvania. We're auditing the Department of Education specifically to see how, when a school district is struggling, what does the department do to try to help that school district rise and to get out of academic distress. Earlier in my term, we completed an audit of the Pennsylvania dog law, which we found the Department of Agriculture had several things that they weren't complying with the law. To the corporate administration's credit, they've taken all of our recommendations to heart and are beginning to, and actually are well into the process of our program, which is something that is very important for families across the state. And we recently wrapped up an audit of the Department of Health and how they were looking at specifically tobacco settlement dollars that were funding the CURE program, which was working with our healthcare institutions all over the state, providing research on trying to improve the health for all Pennsylvanians. And that was, the DEP audit, we were very critical of the department. We had 8 major findings, 29 recommendations. The department, to their credit, agreed with most of our recommendations. But the Department of Health audit, they came out, it was, that it was in a sense a clean audit. They were doing everything that they said they said they were doing. On public education, which is one of the bread and butters of our department, we have continually cracked down on what we view as administrative waste in the system, and also some of the challenges with transparency regarding charter schools in Pennsylvania, whether it be a cyber charter school or a brick and mortar charter school. We put together, we had hearings all over the state because my team sometimes say we have a choice A or B, and then I'll usually say, okay, great, C. And the charter school one was an area where we continually were getting the same findings over and over and over again, and was very frustrated by that. So we decided statute allows the Auditor General to hold hearings. So we held hearings all over the state and put together a charter school report that had the ability to get support from both the Charter School Coalition and the Teachers Union. The reason why I bring that up is that we felt that we had a lot of common sense ideas to try to weed some of the bad actors out of the system and also make sure more money is going into the classroom, whether it's a traditional public school or a charter school. The big issue that we keep seeing over and over again with the charter schools is really two-pronged. One is improper lease reimbursements. We've seen about half of our charter school audits have improper lease reimbursements where the people that own the charter school are getting money that they shouldn't be getting. That's number one. Number two, there's this weird dynamic where when the governor eliminated the charter school reimbursement funding, which was something that, interesting, wasn't really part of the campaign. When you saw the debate on television, it was more about the basic education funding formula. Everyone pretty much agreed that the charter school reimbursement program had been eliminated, but for some reason that had not been talked about. I think that was almost a bigger challenge to urban districts all over Pennsylvania. And so, but what we saw when that was taken away is you've had what is now almost open hostility between brick and mortar charter schools and the chartering district. And we put together, we think, a path forward where some of those hostilities could be decreased. Number one, putting that charter school reimbursement back in, but also when you are in an authorizing year, the charter school has actually a lot of scrutiny. But then in the year they're not being reauthorized, which is once every 5 years, there's pretty much no accountability. And we think you need to have a greater balance.
The traditional schools are held to a different standard in some respects.
Oh, absolutely.
Than the cyber charter and the charters. And there's just simply not the transparency, the kind of funding that has to be public for the traditional schools is not there for the others. And I think that's a...
Yeah, and we put in our report that all school funding, whether it be a charter school or a traditional public school, all of that funding should be available online.
Yes, it should.
Including contracts.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That was in our report. That all of that. But and I say we should find it unacceptable that any tax money would be wasted. But we do know that the charter funding is even harder to get at than a traditional public school. But we think our recommendation was all of it should go online.
So what is the follow-up to that instead?
The follow-up to that is, okay, we have a report, whether it's, and first of all, whether it's an audit we do or a report or anywhere in between. My hammer, so to speak, is doing stuff like this. I mean, we have no authority to make anybody do anything we recommend.
Right.
So our goal is working with the governor-elect and the legislature early part of next year to try to have a charter school reform law, to amend the charter school law so that a lot of these recommendations can be put in place. And I do believe that there is a growing support, certainly I think among the public, but I think even in the legislature for dealing with this issue.
It doesn't seem to make common sense to, I think, a lot of people.
Yeah, I've yet to find any average, everyday Pennsylvanian that think it makes sense. And I think that message is starting to get through to legislators. But part of why I do this is to continue to make the case.
Because I know in terms of, reporters trying to look at charter schools is incredibly frustrating because of lack of transparency.
They are public schools. Now, we get that they have some different, less bureaucracy, and there's a side of that that was meant with the idea of we're going to see what works and what doesn't, and try to take what works and incorporate it into all schools. This is you want to talk about from a policy failure side of it. Let's just say, and there are some charter schools that are succeeding. None of their information, and this is both the charter schools and the traditional public schools are both frustrated by this. There is practically, in fact, I think what we were told was in all of our discussions with both entities is that exactly 0 times has an idea that worked in a charter school been shared with and thus incorporated into a traditional public school. The whole purpose of the charter school law, when it was passed and signed into law by Governor Ridge, was to be experiments in reform so that those then could be incorporated for the benefit of all the children. That has been in the case since the late 90s, and it's happened a whopping 0 times. And I think it's on the collective we of the Commonwealth to fix that.
How do you bridge the hostility though?
Well, part of it is money, and I do think putting the charter school reimbursement funding back in, which I think is the easier solution. The more challenging, but perhaps even the better approach, if it can be done. Because sometimes in policies, you can't always make it perfect. That would be sort of the more doable of the 2 options I think would help. One is put the charter school reimbursement funding back in the state budget. What probably would be the better policy moving forward, if it could happen, and I do know that there is a coalition that has been built around this, that is a education funding commission, and looking at funding of all of our public schools, charter school and public, and finding out what is exactly the cost per child, obviously factoring in special education being part of that, and then reshaping charter school funding and traditional public school funding based on that data. You take a community like Lancaster County, that from 1991, when the last time we really revised the funding formula in Pennsylvania to today, you're a much larger county today. So the funding that the schools in Lancaster County get is based on this 1991 data and then a bunch of Band-Aids since then. Well, that doesn't make any sense.
Can you give an example of something when you say things that have worked in the charter schools that haven't been shared yet with public schools? Do you have specific ideas of what is working? That
I do know that, my first answer to that is there are many charter schools and charter school parents that believe the safety of the charter schools. They feel safer. Now, we'd have to look in the data, but a lot of parents feel that their students that there's a safety element that doesn't exist, at least they feel, in some of your traditional public schools. I also know that a lot of parents of kids in charter schools like the school uniform approach. And again, I'm not waving, these are not magic wands here, but those are 2 items that a lot of parents recite over and over again of why they like their kid being in a charter school.
Okay.
So today, what can you tell us about the audits that you're launching?
Yeah, they're looking at some of the IU units, and why those 2 was not anything in particular that we thought with them, but there's really 2 reasons for this. Number one is, as we're moving into now what'll be a new year and a new governor, but this was thought with whether it be Corbett reelected or Wolf getting his first term, and that is, we have to find ways to do more with less, and we think intermediate units are perhaps ideally positioned to try to find some economies of scale with public education, whether it be even a greater role in contracting, purchasing of equipment, trying new ideas, certainly how they they go about. Some of the ones with more capacity, special education. So we want to look at how that is working, and can there be some broader reforms that done based on that relationship. That's A. B, there's also the concern, and this stems from what happened with former Secretary Ron Tamales. Are any of the intermediate units being used to, in a sense, park employees that governors or anyone else may want to have parked there? And this comes from a request from Senator Fulmer, who said that this issue had come up in the Rendell administration. So we do go back, look at the end of the Rendell administration and into the Corbett administration to see if any of that has happened. And again, look, governors sometimes advocate for people to get positions, and as long as those are real positions of need, that certainly is fine, but we're going to examine to make sure that that's all appropriate.
So there wasn't a precipitating, aside from Tamales,
The-
there wasn't a precipitating.
Tamales certainly precipitated it on that side of it, but part of being Auditor General, you try to be fair about this, and so Senator Fulmer had these concerns about the previous administration, so we thought in fairness we need to look at both.
So you're going to start this with IUs 13 and 15. Are you planning to look at all of the IUs? I believe there's 29 in the state.
We will eventually get to all of them, but sometimes it's hard to say what the definite answer is to that, although we will clearly get to them. What order and how urgent it is will likely depend on what we see here.
Okay. Is there a reason that 13 and 15 were your starting points?
The Lancaster-Lebanon one was simply just, we had people in this area ready to go.
Okay.
The capital area one was because that was where Senator Fulmer had more of his concerns, so.
Okay.
But we were, in a sense, we had the staff ready to go in these regions, so we could start them right away.
Okay. How long of a process do you think that will be?
We will likely be done early part of next calendar year. We anticipate being done sometime in January, early February at the latest.
And then will these findings be made public? Or?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. How soon do you think they'll be available to the?
As soon as the report is done.
Okay.
So again, tell us, can you outline what you'll be looking at? What you'll be looking at?
The contracting role between the Department of Education and the intermediate units, and what do they do on a contractual basis that is more efficient than what is done in the traditional districts or at the Department of Education that maybe can be even incorporated on a broader scale.
If you come up with money, let's say you can pare down X amount of dollars from what the PDE is using with the IUs, would that money then go back into the education system, or would that go elsewhere in the state?
I would advocate, I can't require, but advocate that it go back into the education system. I think there's one, if you can take one belief from the results of the governor's election, that is, the public was frustrated with the state of education in Pennsylvania. So I think that if new dollars become available, I think that they should be put, especially because those are education spending dollars to begin with, then putting that back into the classroom, my view would be that would be the most effective use of those dollars.
Can we speak more broadly to that?
Sure.
To the idea of education funding, because we're quite interested in it here, obviously. I have to say, when you say an education funding commission, a little part of my soul dies, because, commissions tend to be, I mean, do you have any hopes for such commission? And
I have,
what is,
yeah.
Broadly, why is money not being used wisely enough by our schools? Why are programs being cut? Why are...
Yeah.
And I know that's a big
Big
question. I know
question.
that's a big question.
Okay, start off with the commission. We can always have hope. I'm a Pirate fan. I have hope every spring.
I'm a Cubs fan.
Oh, so you're a Cubs fan, okay. But is there anybody that's more lovable and never winning than the Cubs?
Probably not.
Probably not. So, but you.
I feel your...
Yeah, okay, so have hope. But Ronald Reagan would say, trust but verify.
Right.
I think there's a lot of good people involved in this commission. I think there's a lot of good groups, and I think they're very dedicated to it. At the end of the day, there's rug cutting time, which is at the state budget, whatever they recommend still has to be incorporated via law and revenue. Either taking something from other programs, being more efficient in the system, or finding other revenues. So that would have to happen. And that's where, obviously, the incredible challenge comes in. And then you get, and I say this not because it'll then be, the governor-elect will then be the governor at this point. How committed is the governor at that point to say, I'm not signing the budget unless this gets done?
Right.
And I know this is slightly off subject here, but at the same point, when the governor signs a budget, his or her leverage is gone. what gives the governor leverage? That is signing the budget. So that's really where you see, if there's a commitment to get this done, that's because once the pen's on the budget, then a lot of other stuff becomes much more difficult to get done. So that's where, do I have hope that they're gonna come up with good recommendations? Yes. Then the real challenge is getting those incorporated into law and the budget. That is where we should, if it, again, is a good report, you go out and advocate like heck, but there's reasons to be concerned that wouldn't automatically become law. So that's on that. It is very frustrating for me as Auditor General, and I think it should be frustrating to any taxpayer, anybody that has kids in the public schools or any school, that we do all these audits that show where school districts and charter schools can be doing a lot better. And we do the press release or the press conference, and people say, we really appreciate the ideas and this is all good stuff, and then nothing happens with it. Sometimes school districts do it, sometimes they don't, but I think, I'm amazed that there isn't more action from the state government on incorporating things we find in our audits. Because we sometimes provide the pathway to getting more efficiency in the system.
Can you offer some specifics about what those efficiencies?
Superintendent
look like?
buyout contracts, we've found that is an area. The charter school reimbursement issue, we're talking like tens of millions of dollars that has basically gone out the window because of improper lease reimbursements, and we are basically enforcing the Department of Education's own regulations on this, and that they then say they are toothless to do anything about. I'm just giving two examples of that. We have found, for example, and this one is the doozy of all doozies, but the Mill Creek Township School District in Erie County, they for some reason thought it was a good idea to allow Canadian minor league hockey players to go to their school district for free in exchange for hockey tickets for their administrators. It was 9-0 on the school board when we came out with that. 4 of them were up. Now it's 5-4 on the school board. I anticipate the voters will take care of the next round, the next time that is up. But yeah, but that's the type of stuff that, and again, that one is unusual. Not everyone has Canadian minor league hockey players going to their school district, and we obviously know geographically speaking where the minor league hockey team is. But that's, those are items that, I'm amazed that governor and other elected officials don't weigh in more when we have that stuff, because I'll tell you, this stuff all gets pressed when we tout what we find. And we continue to push the envelope on this.
But again, I imagine even sending 10 hockey players, kids to school with, stopping that would amount to a savings, but not.
It's a teacher.
Right.
It's a teacher.
Okay.
And that issue was a teacher, and so.
Right.
In a year when they were looking to, they ended up not doing it, looking to eliminate art and music. A teacher matters. Obviously all teachers matter, and but that was a teacher. That thing they had was a teacher, and so to me, in the grand scheme of Pennsylvania, what could be one teacher, but in that district it mattered.
Right. I guess the age-old question is, are the schools not getting enough money, or are they getting enough money and not spending it wisely?
Well, there's a little bit of both. To say that the whole solution is just more money,
Right.
I think would be a mistake.
Right.
The idea of just putting more money into the system doesn't necessarily fix anything. It can be helpful in certain areas, but it's not a magic wand. I think it's not just about some schools needing more money. Some also need to be more efficient with what they have. It really is a combination of the two.
I picked up on one possible inefficiency, and I don't know that you would have run into this yet because the Common Core and the Pennsylvania Core are so new. But at my kid's school, they told us one night that they don't have one textbook because nobody writes one for Pennsylvania, because we have added things to the Common Core. Is there any way the IUs or somebody could make that more efficient or come up with a solution on that?
Is it possible? Yes. I think what you do see in Pennsylvania, and this has been more of the issue than the issue with Common Core, is that almost every school district has their own textbook for the same subject. And so you can look at, especially when you're talking about the earlier levels, obviously when you get into high school and there's that's a little bit of a different situation, but you're talking about certainly at the elementary school level, and you're talking about some of your basic courses, there should be a way to get more economies of scale from textbooks, for example. I have not heard that they don't write something for Pennsylvania just because of the Common Core, although I do know that we've been playing this ping pong issue with the legislature and the governor on how best to implement that issue. And I know the legislature basically pushed through, I think you had a local legislator who was very involved in that. I know in your county we had a legislator who was very involved in that.
Seth Burr,
Yeah,
Ryan Alden.
and they felt that the governor pulled the rug out from under them at the end. And so this basically too right for us to have picked up on that in any of our audits so far.
Oh, okay, so that's gonna.
But we are aware of the issue.
You are, okay. Well, again, two of the examples you gave, improper lease agreements, superintendent buyouts, I guess people would be curious about what other funding inefficiencies you're finding in schools, because I think people are genuinely wondering, or do our schools have enough money, or are they just not using the money wisely? Again, it's like, and I think we're gonna explore this in the next week.
Yeah, and I think to me, the answer, there's a both. I mean, there's clearly a funding issue, especially in your lower income urban districts.
Right.
It's especially that, I'm not saying it doesn't exist in other districts, but certainly there. And when that charter school reimbursement issue was taken away, that was a major hit.
Huge hit for them, right?
Okay, so, and a lot of your inner ring suburbs have this issue as well. But even there, to say that every school district is being 100%, any of us, nobody's 100% efficient in anything.
Right.
But to say that even if they had the right money, they would be perfect, that would be a mistake as well. So I think part of what we do in our audits is, even if you're fully funded, it's how can you continue to work to improve what you're doing? And so to me, the answer is literally, it's a both. Yeah, they've got to become more efficient. We have to find more efficiencies in the system, but there is a funding issue as well. And to me, there's no question that both are necessary.
So does the Auditor General have any role in looking at the funding formula, the education funding formula?
No, we would really be, I mean, as someone who's been involved in the issue, I certainly have points of view on it, but thoughts about it. But no, what we would basically do is we would see, if it happens, how is it being implemented? That's where our review would come in.
Right, right. People often think too, there's a lot of ways that the PDE, is that, can you talk a little bit about that?
Since we're
that
auditing
perception?
them right now, I would have a better
Okay.
answer for you once the audit is done, once the audit starts, other than that they've been the least cooperative agency of all the agencies we've audited to this point.
Really?
But no, it's not even close. Other than that, I can't tell you any of the stuff that we're actually finding to this point, just because
Sure,
once
it's
the audit
ongoing.
starts. But they have been the least cooperative agency to date.
Any idea why?
All I know is that their spokesperson, when we announced that we were going to amend our audit, basically said that he threatened that they weren't even going to comply with the audit, which then I had a couple words publicly, and then they altered their course on that. But
Right. Is that because the acting secretary, is that you did?
I don't know, and I do know it's not anything from Governor Corbett, because we've audited several agencies under his jurisdiction, and we have had complete cooperation. That, we're just concerned that there's something going on there. Not meaning,
Sure.
just why would they not be more responsive?
That's interesting.
Would you expect, if you're looking at 2 IUs now, obviously there's 27 others in the state, that if you find inefficiencies in 13 and 15, are they going to carry over to other IUs, or are they all very unique in the way they use money?
We do know that they are unique in some regards, and that is that just the geography and the type of school districts and the size and the scope. So, and we know, at least from secondhand information, that in the capacity and the skill level is dramatically different too. I mean, the IU unit in the Lancaster-Lebanon area is considered one of the most professional, meaning but some of so that's where we stand on that, meaning we do know that we have had different feedback on how they are, and some are just more ready to be more technical than some of the others.
Okay.
My question is, when you're looking at their contracts, are you looking at their contracts specifically with PDE or with their contracts with other agencies? I think some of the IUs do training for other agencies. Is that what you're looking at as well? or just
No, we're
PDE
more focused on
contracts?
PDE, more focused on PDE.
What about with local school districts? I know some local districts have decided to stop contracting with the IU for services and you're providing them in-house. Is that part of what you'll be looking at?
That's more when we audit the individual district.
Okay, so that's more of a function of the school district, not the IU?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any districts here that are in audits looming for any school districts?
No,
Lancaster County?
yeah, none that I'm aware of that are looming in Lancaster County, certainly when that changes, we'll let you know.
Okay, yeah. Can I ask you about the DEP a little bit?
Sure.
Do you,
Before you go to the
Oh,
DEP, I
sorry.
have one more question just
That's
on the
okay.
IU
No, that's
specifically. I know this is different from the regular series of audits that go on every couple of years in every IU. What is the difference in focus? So, how different is this audit from the standard audit that, people hear about every couple of years?
I think looking at the broader ramifications of how they can be better utilized is something that's different.
Okay.
A lot of times, when you traditionally what has, and I think maybe the difference with me being Auditor General, what I've promised to do, is that not just go in and say, okay, should you move the pencil 3 feet to your right, meaning,
Right.
and stuff that, that you can be very sort of in this narrow silo of, okay, the chair was in the wrong place. Look at, okay, here's what we found, but what does it mean broadly?
Okay.
How can you take what we find and incorporate that across the board to improve the system itself, and not just say you move your pencil 3 feet to your right?
So the standard audit deals more with the minutia of everyday business, and this is more of the scope of...
And how do you improve the policy across the board?
Okay, thank you.
and I guess along those lines, before we move on to the DEP, why should people care about these audits? Like, what is the average taxpayer gonna, do you think, get out of these?
Depending on what the subject is, but you're basically finding out how your government can be better run. And, if it needs to be run better, and if it does, how does it need to be done? And there's this rumor out there, and I say this somewhat tongue-in-cheek, that, government isn't always 100% efficient.
Really?
Yeah, I know.
Stop the presses.
We have our headlines tomorrow.
Yeah, there you go, yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you don't mind, if we move back to the DEP, because I'm curious about your audit, there were so many staffing cuts to the DEP.
Right.
Did that audit reveal actually a problem with
We-
understaffing?
One of the recommendations was to dramatically increase the enforcement staff and the permitting staff, especially regarding anything dealing with the Marcellus Shale.
Do you have any idea what the status of that?
They have, since that
recommendation?
time, hired 25 additional people into the area we recommended. We think that, we recommended it, we didn't give a number.
Right.
Because we're not there. But we felt that that was a step in the right direction, but was not the entirety of what they needed. But that was, I take this as at least it's a sign that they took our recommendation seriously. And I said, when someone's trying to do the right thing, I'm not gonna, then keep piling on.
Right, right.
So that was a step in the right direction, but we'll continue to monitor the situation to see if they keep making improvements.
Yeah, that was my question about follow-up again. Is that what you do? You don't launch a full-scale audit then to follow, but you do monitor the progress of
Yeah,
implementing your...
we do monitor, we always have to, in a sense, give our audit time to breathe, meaning the agency that we audited or the entity that we audited. When we make recommendations that are as extensive as we did with DEP, to come back 2 weeks later and start another audit to see if they
Right.
incorporate it would just be unfair.
Sure.
So you have to give them time to do, in a sense, what we've recommended. In a sense, not just what we recommended, but what they have a response, and pardon me, what they agreed to, what they agreed they needed to do. And so you give that some time to be incorporated, and then we come back and follow up to see if it's happened.
So the DEP was understaffed. Would you say, do you notice the PDE overstaffed? Do you have any initial impressions about
I would
the
be
size of that
surprised
bureaucracy?
if I come back to tell you that they are overstaffed.
Okay.
The question will not be so much necessarily over or understaffed, it's the level of effectiveness
Okay.
is what we're going to be more interested in. Staffing will likely have a component of that discussion, but we're more looking at how effective are they.
So it's November 6th. You ready to declare for 2016? You running for re-election, U.S. Senate President?
Will not be. I will certainly will not be on the ballot for U.S. Senate President. I would take that one pretty much to the bank. I would. Yeah, I mean, because I have a wife at home that she'd want me to give her more of a heads up that I'm gonna spend 2 years of my life in Iowa and New Hampshire with 2 young kids at home. So
Right.
I think we're here on camera. Whatever, I know, because the people that think about it, they keep giving that meandering way of, like,
Right.
think, well, you never rule anything in or out. Whatever I need to say I'm not running for president, I'll say it. But I'm not running for U.S. Senate either. Assuming my health is good, which I have every reason to believe it is, considering how well my P90X workouts are going. I'll be running for re-election.
So you're on the Paul Ryan exercise plan, right?
I mean, but nothing, I'd be stunned if he gets, because I did my last P90X3 workout about a week ago, and I got in a half an hour 304 push-ups and 186 pull-ups. If he can do that, then kudos to him.
Wow.
I think that was probably
So
the
you're
best.
throwing down?
I think I had the best P90X3 numbers of any state auditor in the country. And I know that
That's a bold declaration.
that's a bold declaration. It's certainly not LeBron James like on the athletic prowess, but you take what you can get. I mean, if you're the most in shape state auditor, I mean, that's better than being in the worst in shape state auditor.
That's very true. I'm just thinking this could be the greatest live streamed editorial board session ever. If you
Yeah, if I start doing the pull-up routine here, then we know we've totally jumped the shark.
Yeah,
now.
do some push-ups on the table here so we can get it on the camera.
Do you want? I would ask if you want me to do. Do you want the plyo push-ups, the airborne, or just straight push-ups?
I'm thinking airborne.
Oh, I'll give you airborne. You want airborne? I'll give you airborne. Whatever you want, we'll do. When I did the 4-ball push-up on the P90X2 program, we have a concrete basement, and my wife comes down, and she just goes this, that just does not look safe.
Explain what it is.
Oh, 4-ball pushes, you put your you get 4, in a sense, weighted balls. And you put your hands on the 2 balls and your feet on the 2 balls, and you just do push-ups then. And you have to have, obviously, your
Yeah, that does not
core
sound safe.
and my wife, I get this, her head comes down, she goes, that just doesn't look safe. And then she just leaves.
You should just scatter some tacks and nails on the floor underneath you as well to make it a little more incentive.
Well, that would certainly be, I mean, there was a part where I going, I better not have a press conference today, but it is incentive. The concrete floor is an incentive that you better keep your core straight and, and firm up your thighs and et cetera, and squeeze something else to make sure that you are entirely locked in.
Oh, sorry, I don't even know how to follow this.
No, it is what it is.
Oh, that was great.
That's the best way to say I think I'm running for Auditor General.
Okay. So any other details you want to share about these audits today? Any other details you can?
We're going to be close to wrapping up the DCD audit sometime in mid-December. I think that'll be done, and we're really looking forward to that one because, broadly speaking, what are the issues that penetrate the public the most? And I think for all the reasons, it's jobs and education.
Right.
And our audit of the PD, our audit of the school districts, our charter school report, we think tackles that first issue and provides a lot of guideposts going forward, as well as what we're doing with the IUs. Second item is jobs, and we're going to see how effective the Department of Community and Economic Development is with their programs. I recognize that is not the whole enchilada, how jobs are created. Your tax structure is important, your workforce development, but the state does play a role in this, and where they do play a role, we want to see how effective they are.
And we've suffered in job creation, so.
Yeah, we saw
Right.
regardless of the 30-second ads, there's no question that other states we're in a better place than we were in 2009, but we're not where we need to be.
Is that because of anything we've done or just because of the economy in general?
I think my sense is there's 2 reasons for that. One is I do think the nature of the economy in the state, because there's some areas of the state that are actually doing very well.
Right.
And there's some areas of the state that we're a huge state, so there's some areas of the state that are still struggling. So that goes into it. I'm concerned just on the wages of the average working Pennsylvanian. I mean, so I think that plays into it, that we've had some states where people have had 0 or negative income growth, and while their costs for, whether it be property taxes, their heating bill, their electric bill, whatever,
Right.
are going up, which has a really drag on the overall economy, obviously very hurtful to those people. But I do think we made some strategic decisions that just from my policy standpoint, weren't good decisions. I think the decision we made on education funding, I do think that there were some tax structure changes that led to losses in revenue that did lead to corresponding job creation. We were the only state that followed up when the president had the 2010 agreement with the congressional Republicans on how to deal with the sequester.
Okay.
We were the only state that then incorporated some of those tax changes into our state government. And this is somewhat, in the weeds, but the federal government doing something stimulative on taxes, they can deficit spend.
Right,
So they didn't
right.
have to make the corresponding cuts. Some of the things that we did, because we have to have a balanced budget in Pennsylvania, meant you had to meet it that some of those issues that led to about $200 million less in state revenue
Yeah.
led to immediate cuts as well.
That's interesting.
And it was done at the very beginning of 2011, without an act of the legislature.
Yeah, so how did that happen? How did they incorporate?
It was basically how the Department of Revenue did. It was a corporate taxing issue called bonus depreciation.
Okay.
And basically, what the congressional Republicans wanted in D.C. in exchange for what the president wanted, they wanted some tax changes, and bonus depreciation was what the president agreed to. We then, as a state, incorporated that bonus depreciation tax change into our Department of Revenue, which cost us revenue, but did not lead to any job creation.
Huh. That was interesting.
It's sort of a nuanced tax issue, but it cost the state about $200 million in revenue, and was not something that was broadly impactful to the state in any good way. And certainly, I don't think the middle class benefited from bonus depreciation tax changes.
Will your department be looking at the state's implementation of the Affordable Care Act?
We are right now reviewing the Department of Public Welfare and some of the spending that has been done on doing the Medicaid expansion
Right.
that Governor Corbett has outlined. So we're in the midst of reviewing that spending. Literally, we're in the process of that right now.
Would you be making a determination about whether that was the way to go? Would
We
that
will-
be part of?
What we would certainly be doing is letting people know how their money was spent on implementing that portion of the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
Certainly, I think whether that was the right approach or Medicaid expansion,
Right.
I guess the question that we could help answer is, here's the amount of money that was spent going in a different way than a pure Medicaid expansion.
Yeah.
Was it worth it? Especially since the new governor is going to apparently go in a completely different direction. So
Right.
the question would be, was that money then completely wasted?
And you'll seek to answer that question?
If Governor-elect Wolf goes in a completely different direction, which he has said he's going to do,
Right.
which is just the
Right.
straight Medicaid expansion, then there's no question that the money that was spent on this will thus be wasted. That doesn't mean that it's hard to go back in time, but when the
Right.
governor sought that approach, he didn't know he was going to lose. But there's no question that if Governor-elect Wolf goes in a different direction, then we would then know that money was then wasted.
You could have just gone with the Medicaid.
He could have just done
expansion
the
in first
Medicaid, he
place,
could have done
right?
that in the first place, which thus would have made this discussion moot.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Speaking of Governor-elect Wolf, he has said he's going to get rid of tax credits that don't create jobs. Do you have any recommendations on that?
I think if a tax credit doesn't create jobs, he should get rid of it.
Could you give him a list of ones that?
That's part of, some of the stuff we're reviewing in our Department of Community and Economic Development audit goes into that to a degree. So we'll have more of a report on that when we're done. So really, there's three things you look at in this audit. One is a program working, helping create jobs? So, okay, that's good. The program has worked in the past, but maybe isn't working now, or looks like it has a track record that's mixed. What can be done to improve it? Then you have the third, where a program that's never worked, and that's where I would say, hypothetically speaking, you just get rid of that then. Or you incorporate that funding into the ones that work. I mean, that would be your policy decision.
Will it be ready in time for his March budget address?
Yes.
You're right.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else, anything?
Good.
Well, thank you so much. I
You're welcome.
really appreciate you joining us here today.
Okay.
I have Keith, when you're, are we out?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
All righty.
We do enjoy it.